Hello and welcome to me. Today, I wanted to talk to you about an idea I had for a little project that I'd like to do on this channel over the course of this year 2026. And this project is supposed to connect to sort of three interests of mine, which is Formula One and reading, and also queerness. The project that I've come up with is called Queering the Calendar. And the idea is for each country that a Formula One race takes place in this year, which is 21 different countries, I will read a book, specifically a queer book that takes place in that country, in order to kind of confront the fact that Formula One, it is a lot of things. It's full of rich people. It's not very women. The fact that Formula One races take place in quite a few not very queer-friendly countries. Obviously, being a queer person in a lot of these places, and that can be being specifically a man with another man, that could be being a trans person, that could be any kind of variety of queerness, is not very safe. And I think there is a certain duty, I would say, as a fan of a sport where the sport takes place in so many different countries, which I think is really cool, to also learn about those places. I think it's honestly quite boring to just be like, oh yeah, well, it's a track in a country and the only thing we hear about it is that it's really warm there. But I would actually like to go a little bit deeper and actually learn about specifically what it's like to be a queer person in those countries. So obviously the main factor is that it's a book with queer themes taking place in that specific country. That was already kind of hard. Preferably it would be a queer author from that country. Obviously, depending on how legal or illegal it is to be queer in that country, it's not that easy to find. I would prefer a fiction book. And obviously, ideally, I would like to be from indigenous communities from that place or from other marginalized communities to learn about those experiences. Keeping all of that in mind, some of the hurdles that I've run into with this is obviously to kind of find examples, because not every book is advertised by the country that it takes place in or where the author's from. You also have books that take place in one country but were written by an author from another. I know I've already set myself up for failure with this a little bit, because it's just that's not how people work. Like, nation states are made up, So it is also genuinely, I don't want to have to know if an author is actually queer, writing about a queer experience. But at the same time, I obviously value hearing from someone who's actually made those experiences rather than someone who's just kind of guessing. It's kind of hard to gauge whether that is actually an accurate depiction of what a queer experience can be like. Because obviously queer experiences can be very different, but also there's some ways that it just maybe doesn't ever really work. And as a straight person might just not know that, especially if it's in a place where queerness is not as talked about. And also, lastly, I think this was from Azerbaijan. I found a book that sounded really, really interesting, but I couldn't find it in English. I guess it doesn't have a translation. That's obviously a me problem. I don't speak most languages in the world. I speak like two to an extent I can read a novel in. That's a really small amount, unfortunately. So that's a limitation I'll have to deal with as well. Now, keeping all of that in mind, I will run you quickly through all of the books that I found to read. I'm not going to give you a big summary because honestly, I wrote these down a while ago and I kind of forgot the plot summaries. I just know that I deemed them suitable for this project challenge, if you will. Since I want to talk about them around the time when the Grand Prix has happened, I bought the ones for the first couple of Grand Prix first. So going in order of Grand Prix, for Australia, I have The Boy from the Mish by Gary Lonesborough, who is also an Aboriginal author. So obviously that's really nice, because I haven't ever read anything from an Australian Aboriginal author. That clearly needs to change. So I'm really glad that I'm going to be reading that book. For the Chinese Grand Prix, I have Beijing Comrades by Bai Tong, which apparently the New York Times called one of the most significant Chinese novels of our time. So that's really all I know. Cannot lie. It's also quite chunky, so I'm kind of scared how I'm going to get through this quickly enough, because my reading speed, as we've discussed in a recent video, horrendous. Next book that I actually, because it's short, decided to start first to get a first win. Have I finished it? Not even close. So clearly that didn't work. Is Kitchen by Banana Yoshimoto. As you can tell, it kind of matches my fingernails. I attempted. The fingernails are getting old and I'm a fifth into the book. The next one is Bahrain. So this is where I already ran into one of the first hurdles, which is that Bahrain is not very big. This is actually another hurdle I ran into, which is there's actually multiple countries on the race calendar that are really, really small. Then it's not even whether or not they're queer friendly. It's just what are the chances of having an out queer person writing about their queer experiences in that country. And if you look at Monaco, that has like 50,000 inhabitants, chance is pretty small, as it turns out. Bahrain has like 1.589 million people. That is only a bit more than my home city, Hamburg. To be fair, there's a lot of queer people that are writing books in Hamburg, I'm sure, but I couldn't find a single one in Bahrain, because I just had a quick little peek at the Wikipedia page for LGBTQ rights in Bahrain, because I don't want to chat shit. This is a theme, I promise you, in world history, which is that, and I'm quoting from the Wikipedia page here, homosexual acts were first criminalized in Bahrain as sodomy while it was a protectorate of the British. I don't know, this is a dicey topic, and I didn't actually make notes on this bit, so I apologize if I misspeak, but I think it's important to not only consider the current state of affairs in different countries in terms of LGBTQ rights and just criticize people for being homophobic. I think it's okay to criticize people for being homophobic, but it should always be with a consideration and a knowledge of the history that led us there. And a lot of the time, that was a colonial history that, if not completely newly introduced certain beliefs like that, at least solidified them more. It's never quite as simple as just like, those people are homophobic. I guess keeping all of that in mind, I was not able to find a novel that takes place in Bahrain and involves queer people. So what I found instead is a non-fiction book that's called Guest Privileges, Queer Lives and Finding Home in the Middle East by Gar Adams. So I think this talks about a couple of different countries in the Gulf states, one of which is Bahrain, which is why I'm reading this. I think one other country is also on the list. Let me have a look. Let me refamiliarize myself with the list I wrote. So this will have to cover both Bahrain and Abu Dhabi, unless someone watching has a different idea. I will also keep searching further in the year, because obviously Abu Dhabi is the last race. For now, this will have to do. After that, we have Saudi Arabia. The book I'm reading for that is The Others by Seba Al-Hertz, which is a lesbian novel. I think the author's name is a pen name, so there's nothing known about them. I did see it pop up multiple times, so I'm just very intrigued. I've also seen a review that didn't sound super promising, but I'll read it anyway. I'll let you know what I think. For the US, I have Love After the End, which is indie queer science fiction, I believe. It's like an anthology of different short stories by indigenous queer authors. I also love science fiction, so I'm very excited for that one. For Canada, I have two options, because the first one is very long, and I'm very concerned looking at the amount of books I need to read and my track record in the last couple of years. So we'll see. The first book I would like to read is Iron Widow by, I'm afraid I'm going to butcher the name, Xiran J. Zhao, who's a Chinese-Canadian author, I believe, uses they-them pronouns. There's already a sequel called Heavenly Tyrant. I know a bit more about this book, but I said I wouldn't go into details. I need to stop. Let's move it along. The other option for that would be Kin, or Kyn. That's just the title. I don't know if that's supposed to be a shorthand or a name or something, by Lawrence Ramsey. And I've forgotten everything I read about this book when I put it on the list, so that's all you got. Next, we have Monaco. And as I already said, small countries means very small amount of queer authors. I couldn't find any. I might substitute it with a French book, which I'm sure every single person in Monaco would hate me for. But since it is literally surrounded by France and also French speaking, I figured it's as good as we're gonna get. For Spain, I actually already have this here. We have Bad Habit by Alana Espatero. That was horrendous. Why do I even try? Also forgot everything about this book, but it's shorter than the other ones, so I'm looking forward to it. For Austria, we have Das Bitter am Tee, which is a short story collection by a queer Austrian author. It was really hard actually to find a book for Austria. Usually you can kind of go by language, right? But obviously a lot of German-speaking books will be by German authors, and Austria is also German-speaking. So I went like down a whole rabbit hole. It took me several hours to find some options, but it is also very short. It's also, I think, self-published, so I love that. I've already kind of started with it, but since Austria is so much later in the year, I figured I didn't need to get started on all of the other books I've already shown you before I read that one. Then, for Great Britain, I decided I would read Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson. I had a whole spread of books I could pick from, but that sounded fun. Am I going to be reading that in like mid-July? Not really Halloween vibes? Yeah, that's okay. I'm fine with that. Then we have Belgium, where I kind of ran into a similar problem as Austria. I think when I looked at some of my sources, which is just a lot of lists of like translated queer literature and things like that, I think I saw a book that said like Belgium. So I will try and find that and add it to the list if it applies. But also, if anybody has an idea for a book from Belgium, please let me know. For Hungary, I found one that is called The Trans-Space Octopus Congregation Stories by Bogi Takash. I'm so sorry. I don't know how to speak Hungarian even a little bit. I'm sorry, that sounds like a fucking riot. Like, I'm so excited to read that. That's gonna be so fun. Also, some of these books I haven't actually tried to buy, so I might run into some problems actually procuring them, but hopefully not. For the Netherlands, I have The Tree and the Vine by Dola de Jong. I also forgot everything about that book. It's Dutch. That's what I can tell you. For Italy, I have Blue Hunger by Viola di Grado. I think that might not actually take place in Italy, but I think as an Italian also, I was like, it's fine. But if someone has another book recommendation, please do let me know. Okay, then we run into the doubles. We have Spain, which we already had. Azerbaijan, I still haven't found a suitable book, so open for suggestions. Next we have Singapore, where I have two options, Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame, and The Black Tides of Heaven, both by Neon Yang. Sounds kind of fantasy or sci-fi vibe, so excited about that. Then we have another US race. Then we have Mexico, where I have Adonis Garcia, a picaresque novel, which the Spanish translation apparently is El Vampiro de la Colonia Roma. Sounds intriguing. By Luis Zapata Quiros, which again, I think is like a book that is seen as one of the like great books about queerness in Mexico, if I remember the Wikipedia article correctly. For Brazil, I have Amora Stories by Natalia Borges Polesso. It sounds like short stories, really not sure. Sounds nice though. For Qatar, so I found a queer man who's from Qatar and who talked a lot about queerness in Qatar in context of the men's football World Cup. And I was like, oh, maybe this man has written a book. He has not. However, he actually does have an organization that advocates for queer rights or gay rights in Qatar. So what I'm actually going to do for that one is read that organization's annual human rights report for the LGBTQ plus community in the Cooperation Council for the Arab States of the Gulf. And like, why not? You know, I think I'm going to learn a lot. It won't be as digestible as all of the novels I have, but I think it will be really interesting regardless. I think we can handle that. And then last one, as I already said, we have Abu Dhabi, where again, we will have guest privileges unless I find another option. So these are all of the books I'm going to read for my project in this next year. It will be tricky to read them all in time for the Grand Prix, but I am up for the challenge and I'm excited to read all of them. I think that will be super, super interesting. I hope it will be good. Obviously, I'm hoping I'll find some books that I really enjoy, but I'm also happy to just kind of learn. Again, it's hard to verify if those like reflect real queer experiences in those countries. I'll just kind of have to trust and we'll see where that leads us. Again, if you know of any queer books from any of the countries on the 2026 F1 race calendar that I might want to read for this, do send them my way. Obviously, except for like the US, UK, those kinds of places. I found workable options for most countries, but not all of them. You know, I would like to be able to read a nice queer novel by a queer author from those countries for all of them. But again, unfortunately, not quite the world we live in. I'm happy with my selection though. I think it'll be very varied, very interesting. And yeah, I hope you're along for the ride and happy to hear about some queer experiences from other countries that we oftentimes don't hear about. Yeah, I'm really excited to do this. I'll be back for the official first episode of the series for The Boy and the Mish and the Australian Grand Prix. I hope you'll be there as well. And until then, I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.